Okay. Hey, so I am late to this fandom, but I spent all of February devouring these books. My friend recommended From Blood and Ash, and we've been buddy reading slash venting and gushing about this series. It's a romance, fantasy, heavy on the romance, enemies to lovers, but there's lots of action and fantasy adventure. And if you're watching this video, you probably know that and you're just looking for a recap because the next book is coming out in a couple of days. So I wanted to get this video out because it's fresh in my mind and I figure some people might need a recap. Okay, so starting with From Blood and Ash, our main character, Poppy, is referred to as the Maiden. She gets this title from the Queen of Solace after she survives a Craven attack that killed both of her parents. Cravens are zombie slash vampire like creatures that were once human but have been turned by a bite. No one usually survives Craven attacks. Either you get turned or you die. But Poppy survived, and her brother survived, but I don't think he was actually attacked. I think it was just Poppy, so she's the chosen one, or she's chosen by the gods. This attack on Poppy's family was instigated by the Dark One, who is the main antagonist of this story. The Dark One's goal is to kill the Maiden and restore his kingdom of Atlantia to its former glory. It was crushed by the Kingdom of Solace, and the people of Atlantis, they're still around. They're kind of lying in wait for their time to rise back up from blood and ash. Okay, so Poppy is taken in by the queen as a child, but she's not raised in the queen's castle. She's raised in a castle outside of the capital city with a duke and duchess. She is forced to live as a maiden, which requires her to wear a veil, remain pure. She's not allowed to have any relationships or friends outside of who, like her guards or her handmaiden or whoever the queen basically says can be in her life, which is no one. So she's basically a loner. And this is all so that she can be pure for her Ascension Day. The Ascension is when she will face the gods for judgment, and they will decide if she is worthy or not. So the queen, the duke, the duchesses, and like all the royal slash rich people have all ascended. This process basically makes you immortal. So it's a sign of wealth to ascend. It's a sign that you're favored by the gods and you're blessed with this rich life. You can tell who's ascended because their eyes are completely black and you can't see their irises. And Poppy, our main gal, she has powers that she can sense people's emotions. She's an empath. And she can't sense any emotions from the ascended people, which is strange. But she doesn't really think twice about it because that's all she's kind of known. The ascended don't have emotions. They're just immortal beings and they're favored by the gods. That's what everyone's told. So Poppy struggles with the idea of not being allowed to leave the castle or live her life. So obviously she sneaks out and lives her life. She doesn't really know what's going to happen if she's decided not pure by the gods, but she's kind of willing to toe the line a bit. So whenever there's a Craven attack, Poppy sneaks out of the castle to assist the guards, but they can't see her. She hides away in the distance and she shoots bow and arrow and she's kind of sniping from a distance, remaining out of sight because she's not allowed to be out there. She learned how to fight and shoot a bow and arrow from her father figure guard named Victor, who secretly trains her because he knows that she needs to feel powerful, especially after what happened to her family. And he kind of toes the line as well with treating her like the maiden and pure, but also gives her a bit of freedom, by training her and treating her more normal. Okay, so on one of her trips outside of the castle, she goes to this gambling pub slash brothel called the Red Pearl, where she has a run-in with this attractive, mysterious guard named Hawk, who she's noticed before, but she's never spoken to. And she gets into a situation where she's wearing a mask, not her usual maiden veil, but she's wearing a mask to disguise her identity, and he thinks that she's somebody else. And they end up having a makeout session, which is crazy because she's the maiden and she's supposed to remain pure. So in the middle of this makeout session, Hawk gets called away on business. He has to leave. And she's like, okay, I gotta get back to the castle and no one will ever know about this. Fast forward, her guard gets killed. Not Victor, her father figure, but her other guard, who she was also friends with, but not as close to. he gets killed, and so she needs a new guard, and guess who it is? It's Hawk, of course. So Poppy doesn't know if Hawk actually remembers her or recognizes her from the pub, but either way, her and Hawk end up having a romance. They fall in love, and Poppy questions if she even wants to ascend. She doesn't want to become this like immortal figure with no emotions, and she's kind of thinking she wants to run away with Hawk. Oh yeah, and her guard that was murdered by one of the Dark One's minions, because the Dark One is still trying to get the maiden. Around this time that Poppy's figuring out her feelings for Hawk and realizing she doesn't want to ascend, the castle is attacked by the Dark One's minions, and Victor, her father figure guard, is murdered, along with a lot of other people. But obviously Victor was a blow, it was sad. But Tawny, who is Poppy's friend, who I haven't mentioned, but she's her handmaiden, she survives, Poppy survives, and so does the Duchess. The Duke has been brutally murdered, which we're happy about because he had been abusing Poppy this whole time. So he's found strung up by the ceiling with a wooden cane through his heart, which is very dramatic, but we don't shed a tear for him. So obviously the castle isn't a safe place anymore, so the Queen orders Poppy, aka the Maiden, to go to the capital so the Queen and the Queen's Guard can keep her safe, and Hawk and a couple of the city guards are tasked to bring Poppy to the capital, where she will be safe with the Queen. Psych. So Poppy, Hawk, and the other city guards, they make it to this place called New Haven, where all of a sudden they're attacked by the Dark One and the Dark One's minions, and oh my god, plot twist, it's actually Hawk. Hawk is the Dark One, and he has attacked the other city guards. So I think everyone pretty much saw that he was gonna be an Atlantean, if not the Dark One himself, because they had hinted a lot at how he had like sharp teeth, or like he was so fast and like all this stuff, you know. It wasn't really like a huge surprise, but it was still like satisfying. It was like, okay, finally, like things are moving, you know, like the plot's happening. So it turns out that Hawk, aka the Dark One, is actually Prince Castile of the fallen kingdom of Atlantia, and his plan was to kidnap the maiden and use her as a bartering chip to get his brother back from the Blood Queen, aka the Queen of Solace. And this betrayal cuts deep because Poppy had fallen in love with Hawk, or who she thought was Hawk, and who she thought was just a regular guy that she was gonna run away with and start a life like far away from any of the Ascended or any of that stuff. But turns out, psych, he was trying to kidnap and maybe murder you this whole time, and he got your father figure killed and your actual parents killed. So, yeah. Okay, so I see a lot of criticism about the romance aspect of this book because Castile lied to Poppy, slept with her, and made her believe he was someone he wasn't on false pretenses. But to me, the author did a good job of illustrating how big of a betrayal it was and not downplaying the conflicting emotions on both sides. Because also Hawk, aka Castile, he almost wanted to give up his whole plan too for Poppy, and it was wrong what he did, and he knows it was wrong. And Poppy doesn't forgive him at this point in the book at all. Actually, in this book, she doesn't forgive what he did. And I don't blame her. And in real life, I wouldn't either. I would never be able to get over this. But for some reason, I just suspend my disbelief. I'm like, it's just a fun book, so I can let it slide. It's not, for some reason, I find it not as creepy as Edward Cullen. A part of him actually wanted to run away and start over with her too, and ignore this whole Atlantean side of him, but it wasn't possible. Like, he is the prince, and he cares about his brother who is being held captive by the Blood Queen, and he has a responsibility, so he had to go through with it. He got her father figure killed, he killed her parents, her actual parents, but like he didn't actually, but like she doesn't know that at this point. She thinks that he is this crazy murderous person known as the Dark One, and he doesn't really give her a reason not to think that for some reason. He just kind of lets her believe that he's a horrible person for a while. So Poppy is still livid with Castile, obviously, but Castile reveals to her that she's actually half Atlantean, and she belongs in Atlantia, and she's been lied to her whole life by the Blood Queen, aka the Queen of Solace, and all of the Ascended, because they drink baby blood and are crazy murderers. And it's no wonder that she feels no emotion from them, because it turns out they're psychopaths. And they're the ones that actually created the Craven. They had been telling their people that the Atlanteans were the reason that Craven existed, but no, it's the Ascended. So Poppy's head is spinning and she doesn't know what to believe. And this book ends by Castile saying we need to get back to Atlantia and get back on Atlantean soil so we can go home and marry my princess. End of story. And you know what? I was glad that I started these late because the next book was already out and I could just go right from this to the next one. No cliffhanger. The next one, A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, starts off exactly where we left off. And that's something that I like about the writing style. Between chapters and even between books, like there's no gaps. It just flows like right into the next chapter. Sometimes even mid-convo, the next chapter will start. So it feels like there's no gaps in time and we're not missing anything. There's no real time jumps. Also, there's a lot of ellipses, which some people hate, but it's kind of the way I think. ... That's a criticism I see. People are like, there's too many ellipses. I guess I'm guilty of liking ellipses. So basically most of this book is Poppy and Castile navigating their fake engagement with real feelings and not knowing how to process these emotions because Poppy doesn't trust Castile and still hates him at the beginning of this book, but she's also conflicted because a part of her like kind of understands, but also like he's the dark one. Oh my god. So Poppy tries to run away and she doesn't get far because she didn't think it through. It's the middle of winter and she didn't bring any supplies, and Castile and his best friend Kieran catch up with her immediately. So, okay, I'll talk about Kieran. He is a wolven, basically a race of people who can shift into wolves at will, kind of like a werewolf. And a side note, every wolven that she meets says that Poppy smells very old and ancient, like almost of death, and that her blood smells ancient. And she's kind of offended in a weird way, but also doesn't understand why everyone is saying this about her. Foreshadowing. So Castile's original plan was to kidnap the maiden and use her as ransom to get her brother back, because her brother is actually the heir of Atlantia, and right now Castile's mom and dad are king and queen, but they've overstayed their time. They've overstayed their term as king and queen. So it's time for the son, the oldest son, to take the spot, but the oldest son is being held captive. So Castile, he's going to think of a new plan to get his brother back because now he actually cares about Poppy, even though he's not really like clear about his feelings. He cares about her and doesn't want to use her as ransom anymore. So obviously his plans have changed and he doesn't want to send Poppy back to the Blood Queen at all. So now he plans to negotiate with the Blood Queen, and he wants to do this by coming back to Solace, married to Poppy, and bring down the whole facade that the Ascended have created about Poppy being this holy figure chosen by the gods and that the Ascended are favored by the gods. Because what kind of gods would let their holy figure marry an Atlantean? And also Castile says he's going to tell everyone that they've been feasting on babies and that they're evil and weren't chosen by the gods at all. And he's planning on kind of blackmailing the queen with this information instead of ransoming Poppy for the brother. The problem is that most of the Atlanteans don't trust Poppy because she was so close with the Ascended, and they would prefer Castile just to stick to the original plans of ransom. Poppy also doesn't trust Castile, but he promises her that they will help find Poppy's brother as well once they get this marriage thing going and they have more power. And so Poppy, now that she knows the truth about the Ascended, she's terrified of the fate of her brother because supposedly her brother ascended, but she hasn't heard from him in a while, and she's really hoping that he isn't out there feasting on babies. And she's also wanting to save her best friend Tawny because Tawny is also destined to ascend soon, and she doesn't want either of her friends feasting on babies and becoming these unfeeling monsters. So either way, Poppy agrees to temporarily marry Castile until they both get what they want, and then they'll go their separate ways and pretend this never happened and that they don't actually care about each other because, yeah, that's of course what's gonna happen. All of the Atlanteans that hate Poppy can't do anything about the hatred because she's betrothed to their prince, and it would be treason if she died by their hand. So there's an older Wolven named Alistair that thinks that their engagement is fishy, and he goes to Poppy and offers her like a way out. He's basically like, is Castile holding you hostage here? Because I don't want you to be held hostage. You deserve better. And Poppy takes a liking to him because he reminds her of Victor, her father figure, and he's just looking out for her. He's offering her a way out, which she appreciates. But she can't take his deal because she has her own motives. She wants to find her brother and her best friend. But she starts to feel a bit more comfortable knowing that she has a way out with Alistair if she really needs to. And she starts to kind of warm up to the idea a bit more. Or at least, not warm up to the idea, but at least, like, she's resigned to it. So at this point in the story, they're still at New Haven because they don't think that the Blood Queen has realized that Poppy hasn't turned up or that she's missing yet, and they're gonna leave to Atlantia soon, but they're just kind of resting for a bit. But surprise, some Ascended show up to rescue Poppy. At this point, Poppy is convinced that the Ascended actually are evil, so she doesn't want to go with them, and she puts up a fight. She's battling with the Ascended until one of them grabs a child and threatens the child, like that he's about to kill the child, and Poppy says, wait, stop, don't kill the child, I'll go with you, willingly. And so she does. She gets in the carriage, and they start taking her back. She's thinking she can just go back and pretend like she doesn't know the truth and figure out a plan, but while she's in the carriage, the Ascended that's in the carriage with her thinks that she smells delicious and starts to attack her, and she's feels like she's gonna die. She feels like the blood getting drained out of her because this Ascended is drinking her blood. And then all of a sudden, Hawk bursts through the carriage and saves the day. He takes her back to New Haven, and she finds out that the kid was murdered anyway, and now she's like triple sure that the Ascended are evil, and she's really starting to trust Castile more and kind of like understand where he was coming from with his crazy plans. Things are still tense between Poppy and Castile, but they have more of an understanding, and Poppy's starting to trust him more. And in a moment alone with Kieran reveals that he thinks that Poppy and Castile are actually heartmates. And she is shocked and decides to ignore this, because what the heck. So now the group's finally leaving to get to Atlantia, and they make it to this place called Spessa's End, which is just on the outskirts of Atlantia, where Castile is like, we gotta marry now and just get the road on the show. You know, we gotta get married. Also, Poppy's powers are getting super strong. She's realizing that she's not only sensing emotions, but she can heal people with a touch. This one young Wolven named Beckett gets injured, and he breaks his back and his spine, and might die, but she runs and saves the day and puts her hands on him, and without even knowing what she's doing, she manages to heal him completely. Most people are like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this in my lifetime before. This is crazy. Like, how could you heal with a touch like that? Like, that Wolven was gonna die. But some of the older Atlanteans start becoming very suspicious of Poppy because they suspect that she's from an old, ancient bloodline called the Soul Eaters, which is very ominous, and they were known for feeding upon people's fear, basically, and like pain, and don't have a good reputation. Poppy is kind of like, oh my gosh, am I a soul eater? Everyone says I have old blood. This is bad. I understand why people might be suspicious of me. I wish they weren't, because I'm not a bad person, but I get it. So a lot of Atlanteans obviously don't trust Poppy still, and Alistair, he's worried about Poppy, and he realizes that Castile is not being totally honest with her, so he drops a bombshell and says to Poppy, I know that this engagement is fake, because there's no way Castile loves you. I've seen what he's like in love, and this isn't it. And it turns out that Castile was in love with Alistair's daughter. But Alistair's daughter died, and Castile's never been the same. This marriage between Castile and Alistair's daughter was supposed to strengthen the relation between the Wolven and the Atlanteans, which has been kind of strained lately. But Alistair was trying to line up Castile to marry his niece then. So why would he marry the niece of his, ex-father-in-law? So Poppy thought this was weird because she was like, why would Castile marry your niece if he was in love with your daughter? It just doesn't really make sense to me. So this is the catalyst for a relationship talk. So Castile and Poppy finally talk about their feelings and admit that they love each other and they have real feelings for each other, and they're finally open and honest, and they decide that this isn't a fake engagement anymore. This is real, and they actually want to get married because they care about each other. Okay, so this relationship talk happens, and then they realize that the Ascended are on the way to Spessa's End to confront them and get the maiden back. And they're like, oh my gosh, should we just get married like right now so we can confront them as a couple, as a power couple? So of course they do. They're on Atlantean soil. Poppy still hasn't met the king and queen, aka his parents, but they decide to go ahead with the marriage ceremony because it'll be a powerful statement. So during the ceremony, as soon as they're officially married, the sky turns completely black, and this is a good omen from the god of all gods, Nyctos, who is the king of gods. And this is a great omen. Everyone is like, oh my gosh, like, this union is blessed. This is what's supposed to happen. We love this for you. Okay, so now some action is happening. A lot of this was relationship stuff and a little scuffle in New Haven, but now the Ascended have showed up for the big boss battle at Spessa's End. But they don't have enough people there because this isn't main Atlantia. Main Atlantia is like through this foggy mountain. So a bunch of the Wolven have to go and like recruit more people to come for this battle. So the Ascended show up with the Duchess, who raised Poppy from childhood, and the Duchess is asking her to come back with them because they're there to rescue Poppy from these horrible people that have kidnapped her. Then Poppy says, no, I'm not going with you. I've actually married Prince Castile, and I'm in love and happy, and I'm not going with you. But the Duchess is thrilled that this happened. She says this is exactly what the Queen wanted, and the Queen is going to be so happy that you've usurped the Atlantean throne and taking it from under them, you know? This was what the Queen wanted, apparently. And Poppy is confused because she had never heard of this plan, and she just thinks that the Duchess is lying and trying to say anything to get her to come back with her. Poppy goes big rage mad and kills the Duchess, and the battle is raging around them. At one point, Poppy and Castile are overwhelmed with like opposing forces, and all of a sudden, a bunch of the Wolven come directly to where Poppy is and form a circle and protect her. She's like, where did all these Wolven come from? But either way, this is great. Like, I'm glad they're here because I really needed them in this moment. So with the help of all the Wolven that came in last minute, they win this battle and go to Evemon. So with the help of all these Wolven, they win this battle, and they immediately head to Evemon, which is the capital of Atlantia, where the king and queen are. Because Poppy needs to meet her mother and father-in-law, and they have to talk about what the heck they're going to do now that the maiden has fallen in love with their prince. Just as they arrive to the capital, Alistair and a few other people come out to meet them and say, like, I have something super important to talk to you, Castile. Can we talk in the corner real quick? And Castile's like, right now? Like, we literally just got here. And Alistair's like, yes, we have to talk now. And so Poppy's like, yeah, sure, that's fine. I'm just gonna go explore this temple right now while you have your private chat. Don't worry about me. He should have worried. The young Wolven, Beckett, goes with Poppy to the Temple of Nyctos so they can explore. Once they get into the temple and they're looking around a bit, Poppy turns to Beckett to say something and realizes he's gone. And then other people have slipped into the temple behind her, and it was a trap. These people start stoning her, and like they're trying to kill her. They're throwing rocks at her and like yelling slurs and saying she should die. As they're attempting to stone her to death, some power inside Poppy rises up, and she feels all of their hatred and anger, and she like takes it. She pulls it out of them, and then she blasts it back onto them, and their bodies go flying, and they're all mangled and twisted and like dead on the ground from their own hatred being blasted back at them from this power that all of a sudden Poppy has. As their bodies go flying, it starts raining blood from the sky, and all of the torches in Nyctos' temple just light up. And at this moment, Castile, the king and queen, and about 100 Wolven all burst through the doors of the temple and see what's going on. Everyone is shocked, and they're just staring at Poppy like, what the heck is happening? Until the queen steps forward and takes off her crown and says, bow before your new queen. That's the last line of the book, and again, I'm glad the next one was already out because I just went right into it. Okay, Crown of Gilded Bones picks up right in the temple. The queen reiterates, bow before the dot 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 before the last descendant of the most ancient ones, she who carries the blood of the king of gods within her. Bow before your new queen. And we know from previous mentions that Nyctos is the god of all gods, so is Poppy descended from Nyctos? Foreshadowing. So it turns out that being descended from the gods makes you a deity, and there hasn't been a deity seen in centuries. The reason that the Wolven were so connected to Poppy is that they are by default bonded to any deities, and since there aren't any, Poppy all of a sudden has thousands of Wolven who will now die, or die to protect her, basically. Every Wolven except, dun dun dun, Alistair. More betrayal. It turns out that he orchestrated this whole attack. He knew who Poppy was this whole time, and he had heard a prophecy that talked about how she was going to be the downfall of all Atlantia. So he thought that the right thing to do was to kill her. He was actually there when she was a child and her family was attacked by the Craven, and it wasn't Castile, it was Alistair who was trying to kill her and her family back then. He had just thought that she had died until he saw her with Castile and recognized her, and all those times that he had gone to her and said, hey, I can help you out of this fake marriage, I want what's best for you. He was really just trying to get her to go with him so he could give her back to the Blood Queen. He thought that Poppy would go big baby rage mad and force the Blood Queen and everyone around the Blood Queen to kill her. And so that was his grand plan. So going back to right now in the temple, Alistair comes in and he's like, oh, okay, she's not dead, but his minions are all around the temple, and so he calls an attack. And so he's like, attack, attack, attack. Poppy gets captured, and the next time she wakes up, she's held in the cell being confined by bone chains, which are meant for deities. Basically, they suppress her powers, so she's unable to call the Wolven, and every time she tries to move, they tighten up around her. Alistair comes and sees her down in the cellar and says this whole plan to her, because that's what bad guys do, they tell you their plan. And he also reveals that Beckett wasn't actually Beckett when she was being led to the trap. It was this guy named Commander Jansen, who was a changeling and took Beckett's form. So we can rest easy knowing that Beckett is still a good little wolf, but also sadly he died, so rest in peace. So now Alistair and his followers, they take Poppy to the border where they're gonna drop her off, like with the Blood Queen supporters, but boom, all of a sudden, Castile, Kieran, the king, and a bunch of their followers, the good guys, I guess, they show up and they fight for Poppy. They're like, heck no, you're not taking her. And they fight it out. Kieran releases Poppy from her bone chains, and she immediately goes to get revenge on Commander Jansen for tricking her and killing Beckett. And as she's stabbing him in the heart, she doesn't realize, but he has a crossbow, and he releases the crossbow bolt, and it goes straight through her heart. And she dies. Okay, she's dying, but Castile's not going to have her die on his watch. So he makes a split-second decision to ascend her. And this requires him to drain all of her blood and replace her blood with his blood. And this is not allowed. This is how you make vampires, or the ascended, which is forbidden. And honestly, I would have been very angry if Poppy turned into a vampire, because that would have just, the story would have sucked if she couldn't go outside or like experience all the Atlantean landscapes. So Castile he'd rather save Poppy even if she becomes ascended. He just wants her to live. So he does all that, and when she wakes up, turns out she didn't turn into a vampire. She didn't ascend, and they don't know why. They're like, is this because you're descended from Nyctos? Is this because you're actually full-blooded Atlantean? Either way, it doesn't matter. We're just happy you lived, so let's move on with the story for now. They kill Alistair and his minions, but presumably more are out there trying to stop Poppy from taking the crown, and they know about this prophecy where she's supposedly the harbinger of death, so they want her gone. Poppy never actually wanted to be queen or take the crown, but after a conversation with the king and queen, her and Castile realized that they might have to take the crown to stop a war, because Castile's dad, the king, has been training an army for centuries so that they can move in on Solace and take back the kingdom. They want to rise from blood and ash. Poppy and Castile think it's better to negotiate because Poppy, even though she sees how evil some of the Ascended are, she knows that there are good people out there, and she doesn't want a big bloodshed battle, and neither does Castile because in the last war it didn't go so well for Atlantis overall, and they would just rather be peaceful. So they're making all these big decisions when all of a sudden, surprise, an Ascended shows up to talk to Poppy. The Ascended is none other than her brother, who she's been worried about this whole time, and she sees him and her heart breaks because he has actually ascended, and he's flanked with the royal guard, and he comes bearing a message from the Blood Queen. He delivers a message from the Blood Queen requesting a chat with Poppy where they can discuss the futures of their kingdoms. He says that if there's going to be war, that the Atlanteans will lose because they have the Revenant on their side. Poppy's just looking at him like sad, like, oh my gosh, my brother has become an emotionless monster, when all of a sudden she sees a little flicker of him in there. And he pulls her in for a hug and whispers in her ear, Poppy, listen, I know the truth. Wake Nyktos. His guards are the only thing that can stop the Blood Queen. Then he goes back to being emotionless and leaves with the guards. And Poppy is shocked, and they're like, should we trust him? And ultimately, her and Castile decide, yes, we should trust him, or at least see this out. So they go to wake up the god Nyktos. They show up, Nyktos isn't happy to see them, but he agrees to talk to Poppy because she's blood. Poppy asks Nyktos, what are the Revenant? And Nyktos just freaks out and is like, you need to leave. I don't want to talk about or hear about those abominations of life and death. Get out of here. Poppy's like, wait, we need the guards. That's why we came here. And Nyktos is like, just get out of here. You have the power inside you. Figure it out. So they can't do anything now. They just have to go meet up with the Blood Queen. So Poppy, Castile, and a little crew of people, they go and they try and have the element of surprise because they're going early to this meeting with the Blood Queen. But double surprise, the Queen expected them to have the element of surprise, so she actually has her guards head them off and intercept them when they're in this little tunnel trying to get up to the castle. In this tunnel, before they were intercepted, they see this big mountain cat in a cage, and they're like, why is there a caged mountain cat down here? And we thought these were extinct. And then Poppy goes to touch it, and it turns into a man for a split second. And they're like, what the heck is this? And then just as they see that, the Queen's guard comes down and says, the Queen's going to be pissed that you saw that. Come with me to the meeting with the Queen. You didn't surprise us. So the Blood Queen is in this room, and she's waiting for them. And beside her is Castile's brother, and Poppy's brother, and Poppy's best friend, and a bunch of the Queen's guards. It's supposed to be a sign of goodwill that the Queen brought their loved ones to the meeting, to show them, look, like, I've taken good care of, like, your loved ones, your people. Turns out Castile's brother Malik wasn't even held captive. He was just enjoying the castle's luxuries and living it up until he was ready to go back to Atlantia to take his rightful throne. The Queen's plan this whole time was for the maiden, aka Poppy, to marry Malik, and so that they could go back together and take the Atlantean throne. It just turned out that Poppy married the wrong brother for the Queen's plan. Castile is obviously shocked that his brother has kind of betrayed him. There's like a theme of betrayal throughout this whole series, I guess. Poppy is still kind of like trying to negotiate, but the Queen is just like, no, I'm not going to negotiate. I want Atlantia. Poppy and Castile are like, we're not going to give you Atlantia, and I guess it's going to have to be war. And then at this moment, the Queen decides to show them what a Revenant is. She has the woman guard that intercepted them step forward, and then has another guard come and stab her through the heart. And she dies right on the floor. The guard dies. Everyone's shocked, but the guard slowly comes back to life, and they realize that's what a Revenant is. It's these people, or I guess as Nyktos said, abominations of life and death that can't die. They come back to life every time. Even if you chop their head off, they'll come back to life. Then another bombshell drops. The Queen reveals that she's actually Poppy's biological mother, and she's not actually ascended. She is the lover of King Malik, who was Castile's mom's first husband.
And I just want to add, since it's a little confusing, Malik is the king, Malik is Castile's brother's name.
He was cheating on Castile's mom with a mortal known as Isabeth. Castiel's mom was jealous and poisoned Isabeth, and King Malik was distraught because they were heartmates. So he decides to bring her back to life, aka ascend her, aka turn her into a vampire, the same way that Castiel did for Poppy. But it turns out that Malik was actually one of Nyctos's twin sons, and so he was a god, because he was directly like a son of a god, so that makes him a god. And so when he tried to turn Isabeth into an ascended, she actually turned into a god herself. A god. Kind of like a fake god. After that happened, Malik went missing, and Isabeth waited around for him, but he just never came back. And Isabeth spent decades waiting around for him, and he didn't return, and she ended up marrying the King of Solace, where she waited decades, plotting her revenge on Atlantia and Castiel's mom. So this is all crazy news, because the Queen of the Ascended isn't even ascended. And Castiel's mom knew this whole time and didn't warn them, because she was ashamed of her whole poisoning plot that she did back in the day. Everyone is mind blown and confused, but the fact that Isabeth, the Queen of Solace, is actually Poppy's mom doesn't stop her from trying to use Poppy for her own revenge plot. There's no love lost between them. Even with all these revelations, Poppy and Castiel still aren't backing down. They see the Revenant, they're like, no, we're still gonna fight. I don't care that you're my long-lost mom, I'm still gonna fight you, you're crazy. So the Queen decides to prove a point by beheading Poppy's brother right in front of her. And then chaos breaks loose. Poppy tries to fight the Queen and use her powers against her, but the Queen just laughs and is like, you don't know how to fight like a god, baby. I'm a god. And she basically ragdolls Poppy and like strangles her. And it seems like she's about to strangle Poppy to death with these like magical hands that like, it's not her real hands, it's like magical hands in the air, you know what I mean? Until Castiel is like, wait, stop. I know how you can control her. Take me. So Castiel exchanges Poppy's life for taking Castiel as a prisoner so that the Queen can use Castiel and Poppy's love of Castiel to manipulate her and the throne of Atlantia. During this whole strangle session, Poppy passes out, and then when she wakes up, Castiel's gone, and the rest of her crew are like, yeah, he was taken. Poppy is livid, but she realizes that if Malik is her dad, that means she's actually a god herself, and she can call the damn guards. So that's what she does. She goes to Elysium to get the guards herself. Turns out the guards are an ancient race of Atlanteans called the Draken, who are a race of people who can turn into dragons. She talks to the head Draken, and the head Draken confirms that they can kill revenants, and they agree to help if Poppy helps them find Poppy's father. And Poppy's like, Malik's been missing for like centuries. And the Draken's like, oh no, Malik isn't your dad. His twin brother is your dad. And he takes the form of a cave cat sometimes. Have you ever seen anyone like this? And Poppy's like, oh my gosh, we saw him in the tunnels. So she says, yes, I will help you get my dad back, and if you help us in this war. And so they make a mutual agreement. So after she gets these guards, she calls a meeting with the King of Solace. The king shows up, flanked by his guards and one revenant, and surprise to him, Poppy has all the power now. She immediately attacks and beheads the king, and has one of the Draken attack the Revenant. And the Revenant is like, he sees his life kind of flash before his eyes. He's like, is this it? Am I actually dying now? But Poppy spares his life and gives him the head of the king and says, deliver this message. Prepare for war. So the next one is called War of Two Queens, and I think it's obvious why. I'm glad it's out soon because I'm interested in what happens next. And I picked up this one, Shadow in the Ember, in the meantime. And it follows Nyctos and the original maiden, aka Poppy's grandparents. And I think it's kind of like their love story. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be about, but should be interesting. Okay, I hope this was a good recap. I tried to squeeze in as many relevant things as I could, but let me know if you're going to be reading the next one or if you have read this series and what you think of it. I know there's mixed reviews. Overall, these were just like a fun fantasy romance series. It's pretty light reading. Even though they're like kind of thick, it goes quick, you know? There's also the iconic hot springs scene. If you know, you know. Brothels just to like see what's up. She's not hooking or anything. What the fuck am I rambling on about?